Well, hello, and welcome to Find You Fall in Love. If you are listening to this on the podcast, if you are watching this on YouTube, I just want to say hey and welcome. So, I recorded an entire podcast for yesterday, and I listened to it and edited it. It was like 40 minutes. I got it down to about 28. And then I began listening to it again after I'd taken out all the ums and the dead space and the terrible concepts. And I listened to it again. And what I recognized, and I think this is one of the most powerful things that we, and I mean we as white folks, can do is recognize when our privilege is showing. And I realized that over half of it was me speaking from that place. And while there were some good concepts in there, I decided to just scratch the whole thing, because going back through and editing all that out, it would have made all the core pieces that I really wanted to remain, it would make them go away and not make any sense. So I've decided to kind of condense what I was trying to say. If you've listened to my podcast before, you'll know that I talk a lot about, and I have notes here. Whether or not I follow them, that's another story. But you'll know that I have talked a lot about apologies and having done a lot of soul work and a lot of deep thinking over the last couple of years. Like, I started on this personal development journey, which has led me to wanting to coach other people through it, about 10 years ago or more, 10-ish years ago. And so I've learned a lot, and I'm learning even more, and I'm learning that I also need to unlearn. And I think that's kind of what a big part of the journey that I am going through right now is learning and unlearning. Excuse me. And a part of this process is learning how to apologize. And for me, I learned at a very, very young age that apologies don't mean shit unless they come with behavior change. So you may apologize, but the person who you are apologizing to is not going to be able to accept that apology or believe that that apology is actually meaningful until a behavior change has occurred. And this is just after years and years of being apologized to and behavior staying the same and remaining the same. And so as we go through this process, what I'm learning is that, rather, as I'm unlearning, I am learning that some of the things that I've said even in the last couple of weeks have been not appropriate. And I think that we are all going to make these mistakes, and that that's okay, as long as we understand and have people pointing it out, and we are also learning. So, and we are doing better, because when you know better, you can be better and do better. As far as the race situation, racism, and all of that stuff, quite frankly, I am wholly unqualified to talk about that. My ancestors are English, Greek, and German. Like, I have no legs to stand on, other than I have dated Black men, but that's it's relevant for about 5 seconds, and that's about the extent of it. So quite frankly, as far as the podcast goes, I have been incredibly quiet because I have just been listening and trying my best to unlearn as much as humanly possible. And as much as I would love to have changes happen immediately, I am also recognizing that and noticing that it's going to take a lot of actual dedication and actual work, and it's probably going to be decades. As I've started to learn more about the civil rights movement and the things that we weren't taught in schools, I'm recognizing and seeing a lot of patterns and a lot of things that never actually changed. Some things changed, and I think in the business world, a lot of things changed. And as far as schools being desegregated, obviously that happened. But beyond that, from a social standpoint, not a lot changed. And that is a problem. And I think up until about 4 years ago, I felt like we were going on down the right path. But what I really am starting to recognize is that all of this stuff was still happening. And it was kind of happening. There was an underbelly and an undercurrent in our society that felt a lot more hidden. But I think just by the use of social media and people actually taking videos of these things, it's not that the racism wasn't there. It's just we have recordings of it now. And as someone who has kept almost everyone except my husband at a distance for the last 7 years due to my own stuff, I have been willfully ignorant. For lack of a better way to put it, I have been willfully and woefully ignorant and blind to what was right directly in front of me. And that is something that I feel terrible for. And I'm sorry for. And because, again, apologies don't mean shit unless you have some kind of plan as to a behavior change and how you're going to implement that behavior change. Because we all can sit and discuss and talk about it. And we can put ourselves in really uncomfortable situations and have uncomfortable conversations. And that's really the only way that this is all going to shift and change in a meaningful way. And it's selfish of us to ask, and me in particular, to ask people to be patient with me, because people of color, women of color, have been patient and silent for so frickin' long, and they don't deserve to have to be patient any longer. It's up to me and it's up to the rest of us to do the work and find the information for ourselves. Having said that, when I said that I've had some really uncomfortable conversations, I had one recently, and I was the only white person on the call, and I was just helping someone out with a business decision. And of course, the conversation turned to current events, as all of my conversations seem to be doing lately. And I said a few things, but really I just sat and listened because I felt like that was important. And I learned more than I could possibly imagine. There was a woman who was into her 40s, possibly into her 50s, because she had a grown child. And she said, "We've been having this conversation since he was 5." And I'm not kidding you. I'm like going, okay, if he's 18 now, that means you've been having this conversation for 13 years. 13 years ago, what was I doing? And I'm like, oh my God. And further than that, it's been going on even longer than that. I can tell you right now, I can tell you just by half of the things that I have watched. And I think the distinction between, or something that I am coming to understand, is that as a white person, part of our privilege is being able to trust the cops, being able to trust that the police are going to be there when you need them and they're going to do the right thing. Now, my own personal experiences with that really don't exactly line up with that. When I have called and needed police, they have not come in a timely manner, let's just say. And I've had cops called on us before, and we were just watching a show and it was a little bit loud, and my husband was pounding a ferret cage together in an apartment. And the show that we were watching was the version of that episode of Lost where Claire is pregnant and she has the dream that somebody's stealing her baby. So she wakes up screaming bloody murder, and now you hear somebody pounding. Anyway, somebody thought I was being murdered. However, I didn't understand what was happening at the door when they came because it was 45 minutes later and we were on to another episode. And I wasn't even listening to the episode because I had something in my ears and I was watching a business conference. So even if, I don't know, here we go. My experience with the police has not been ideal, to be really honest with you. However, I have never in my life feared for my life when I have been pulled over by the cops. And so, and in general, I have never feared that the cops were going to murder me. Like, that was never. Rape, yes. Murder, no. Radically different things, right? So that type of distrust and that type of fear is not something that I understood. And until I got on this call, and I was sitting across from somebody who I've had numerous conversations with, and she's looking me in the eye because, she's looking at the camera, and she's explaining some of her fears. And it wasn't until that moment that it became even more abundantly clear, because I can read stories all damn day. But when it's somebody sitting across from you that you care about, and that I would dare say that I love her. We've only known each other from a business standpoint, but I know that anytime I needed to talk about a business problem, I could go and hash it out with her. So in that sense, I love her and I trust her and I care about her and I care about her well-being. And in that moment where I'm sitting across from this person that I've had so many conversations with, and this is the first time that she has opened up and told me something like this, that she is genuinely scared, I'm like, why didn't anybody tell me? But then I recognized that, again, we are asking people to open up about something that we couldn't possibly understand. And until they know that you are a safe person to talk to about something like that, and that you will not try to downplay their fear, because I don't talk about my sexual abuse. I've not told you all of it. I've told you snippets, tiny snippets on the podcast. But I don't talk about my experiences with that, because unless I'm talking to someone who has gone through that or worse, they could not possibly understand what I'm going through unless we are already on the topic and I am in a particularly open kind of mood. It's just not something that I do, because people don't understand. If they've not been through something terrifying like that, they don't understand. And it wasn't until we had this conversation that those two things really started to click in my mind. And so this lack of trust with white people is by people of color toward white people is completely and totally justified, because we have routinely, systematically, over hundreds of years, ostracized them or bombed their neighborhoods. Look up Tulsa if you don't know what I'm talking about. And we have in Philadelphia, I believe Philadelphia was another one. There's several, which is just completely jacked and completely fucked up and infuriating, but I'm not going to go into that, because again, I'm wholly unqualified to give you that kind of information. I understand now why, even though I have dated a lot of Black men, why, even though I have had a lot of Black friends, there has always been this arm's length type of relationship that has happened. And I have never pushed on those walls. I have never asked about it even, which is my own fault. But I get it now. And the biggest thing that I can do to change that kind of idea, and that the way I operate, is to simply educate myself and to unlearn and relearn actual history. And that's what I'm doing, and that's what I've been doing. I'm going to put all of the resources that I have read and the ones that are still on my list in the show notes on my website of this podcast. So if you are interested, you're welcome to do that. To dive into those. And if you have any that you have read that I have not listed, I would absolutely love if you would leave those in the comments. I do have a few episodes planned in the future where I'm going to have different guests on. I've never had guests, but I feel like this is an important topic and I have a platform in which I should use it to have some education, and for other people to really start to hear the stories and hear the conversation. And until we start to have some of that, I feel like, and again, I'm wholly unqualified, so I'm going to have people on here who are qualified to have those types of conversations for you and with you. I will say that the veil has been lifted, and there is no more room for me or anyone else, anyone in my family, to continue to deny what's been going on all this time. And we are working really hard. I try and bring this stuff up with my kid almost every day. And we watch something that includes diverse people, which we have been doing that anyway, but I really wasn't making a point of doing it. It was more like, hey, we want to watch Casey Undercover because it's a really good show. But now I'm recognizing that those sorts of things are really important and things that we will intentionally do. And watching documentaries, and I had my kid watching Just Mercy the other day. And he didn't watch the whole movie, but he watched a good bit of it. I had him leave the room when they started electrocuting the guy, which they didn't show it. And I wasn't sure because I watched Green Mile, and that was terrible. And he's 7, so he doesn't need to see that sort of thing. However, I think that we're going to start watching more of those types of things so that he just understands that, because we had a long conversation while we were watching that movie. He's like, Mom, what is going on? Like, did he murder someone? And I'm like, no. You know, he's 7 and he's asking me these kinds of questions. And why is he in jail then? Well, they think he murdered him. Well, because he's Black? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, that's not right. And I'm like, I know. That's why we're watching the movie, is to educate ourselves on the type of things that are happening. And so unlearning and relearning, or unlearning and learning actual history, really diving deep into trust. That's where I really wanted to go with this. Let's talk about trust, because I think this particular topic can be for anybody across the board. As some of you know, if you've been here for a little while and you've listened to the podcast for a little while, one of the people who sexually abused me was a family member. And how do I explain what that does to your ability to trust men, to trust white men, to trust? So I've heard a lot that white women cross the street when they see a Black guy. Oddly enough, I don't. I cross the street when I see a white guy. And most of that has to do with my PTSD. The family member wasn't the violent sexual assault. It was just consistent, prolonged, and very traumatic. So when you are taught at a young age that your family members are people that you can trust, they are people who are there to keep you safe and who are there to love you and be there for you, and then something like this happens, it destroys your ability to trust people. It destroys your ability to trust men. And so now this is the lens that I can talk to you from. and having been screwed by the government. Just as a general rule, like, I've never trusted them, but I feel like it's 10 times worse now than it was before, just because of how much we have all been lied to over the last, I don't know, my entire life. And then just in general, probably back to the beginning of our government, and the beginning of our education system. So, how do you go forward? How do you move forward from that place of, what the hell, I've just woken up and my entire world just shattered to the ground? Or, in the case of, I have never in my life trusted the government, white people, from a person of color standpoint, the government, cops, white people. How do you move forward and begin the process of trusting certain people? How do you start? And the other thing that happens is that when you put your trust in someone and they betray that trust, it really affects your own ability to trust yourself and your gut and your feelings. And this is something that people who are abusive, people who are oppressive, are counting on your inability to trust yourself, to know who to trust and who not to trust. They're counting on that. That's an integral part of the plan, is to keep that in place so that it keeps you stuck, right? And you don't move forward and you don't try to find new people, right? Or you don't try to get yourself out of that bad situation, out of that abusive relationship, out of that abusive home, out of that abusive work relationship. They're counting on the fact that you are going to say to yourself, it doesn't matter, because it's going to be like that anywhere I go. Everyone's going to treat me like that, blah, 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 right? So how do you begin to undo that? And how do you begin to trust people again? And how do you begin to trust yourself again? So as far as trusting yourself, it's going to start with little tiny decisions that are going to seem insignificant and silly and not worth it, or not impactful, not worth it, but not impactful. Okay, so for instance, what you eat that day, you're going to pick a good food. Pick good food, and you're going to trust that you are picking the healthiest food that you have available to you. This is the best thing that I can eat for my body. I trust that this is what I need today. Let me be clear. It could be a piece of chocolate cake. There are some days where chocolate is a healthy choice because it does dopamine things with your brain. I don't know the science behind that, but I know that there are times where a piece of chocolate cake is super satisfying. Now, a whole cake, not so satisfying, but a single piece is incredibly satisfying. It's going to mean picking out clothes that make you feel good about yourself, right? That really comfortable, really perfect fitting pair of underwear. And trusting that that's going to help. It means reaching out and getting therapy if you absolutely need it, which I highly encourage, because you probably do. if you've been in an abusive relationship for any great length of time. And trusting that this professional, whatever professional you end up staying with, because believe me, the first therapist you go to doesn't mean that's the only therapist you'll go to. When it doesn't feel good anymore, or when you're not getting the help that you really need, it's time to find a new one. Okay? It's trusting that this process is going to help you. It's finding people who have been through something similar as you, and not necessarily commiserating with them, because their support groups are sometimes helpful and sometimes more damaging. But it is finding people who are like you, that you could just go out and you don't have to talk about that thing, but you just know that both of you have been through that thing. And so if you needed to talk about it, or you really wanted to talk about it, you could, right? And trusting that you have someone in your life that will hold space for you. And these small random acts of finding the best food for your body, finding a new job if the one that you are currently in is not healthy for you, finding a friend or someone that you can truly confide in. This is how you start to begin to build your own self-trust, right? Self-trust. How do you build up trust in other people? Because that is a whole nother level, and that is just going to take time. And one of the greatest things that you can do, because people are going to come and they're going to go in your life, and one of the greatest things that you could do is disconnect from the outcome, right? Putting up healthy boundaries, understanding what healthy boundaries are, how to put them up, and how to stand up for yourself when those boundary lines get crossed in a healthy and productive way is essential. And I have several episodes on boundaries, so you can go back and when is it time to let a relationship go and things like that. So I have other episodes on that, so check those out. But having those healthy boundaries in place and knowing what you're willing to tolerate and what you're not willing to tolerate is the first step. Before you even get out into the open, look back at your previous friendships, previous relationships, and go, okay, what didn't I care for that I don't want to experience again? What did I experience that I don't want to experience again? Were there red flags that I can think back and remember before they happen, before shit hit fan? And then, sorry, I needed a drink. And then, after you've kind of made those lists, whether they be in your mind or on paper, much more powerful if you put it on paper, then it's time to disconnect from the outcome. Meaning that the friend you make tomorrow doesn't need to be your friend in 20 years. Would that be great if they were? Absolutely. But it's really kind of okay to have a revolving door of friends, because as you grow, if those people are not growing with you at the same rate that you are growing and moving and changing, the only thing it's going to do is serve to pull you back down to where you were. And so it's okay to let people go if they are not at the level that you're at, or if your life experiences are so radically freaking different that there's no way you can connect with this person anymore, or if they're so damn stuck and you've attempted, or you don't have the energy to attempt because you're too busy worried about yourself, but if you've attempted to help them grow and they just flat refuse, That's on them. That's not on you. And it's time to let it go. And I will say, as a person who is always the person reaching out until recently, once I stopped reaching out to people all the time, it was amazing how few friends I actually had, because all of those friendships depended on me reaching out. And so when I stopped, the relationship stopped. And clearly it wasn't that important to them. And that's okay. I was hurt for a long time. I realize now that it clearly wasn't there to begin with. You know what I mean? Or it had fizzled out long before I had allowed it to fizzle. And so I reach out when I have the energy, with no expectation that they are going to ask me how I am or ask me if I'm doing all right. There's no expectation there. And that's okay. It is what it is. And have I contributed to that negatively? Probably. So it is what it is. It's okay. So that's what I've got for you. Learning how to trust again, or trust to begin with, is a really challenging thing as a human, and yet it's incredibly necessary. So if you are interested in talking deeper with us, I would love to have a couple of people on a Zoom chat where we really talk about trust and how to really break down those walls and build up the right ones. You know what I mean? Build up the healthy, proper boundaries. I would love to have a group chat on that. If you're interested, leave a comment or shoot me an email at info@amberslocum.com. Going to be changing that email address soon, but wanted to go ahead and put it out here for now. Or you could actually reach out to me at amberslocumwellness.com. So amberslocumwellness@gmail.com. And you can go to amberslocumwellness.com if you are curious about what I offer, if you're curious about coaching, where we can really dive deep into boundaries and things like that. I would love to chat with you. And if you are feeling very lost right now and in need of some direction, I would be happy to help you with that. It is June, so it is Pride Month, and that can bring up a lot of feelings for someone who is still in the closet. If this is you, 2 episodes back, I discussed Pride Month and a couple of other really important topics. So feel free to listen to that. If you have any questions or you would like to, if you need to talk, I'm always here. So I hope you have an amazing day, and we'll talk to you all later. And I really hope this was helpful. Let me know in the comments. Have a good day. See ya. Bye.